I was recently playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey and it got me thinking about something. We all love it when a character performs a leap of faith. After all, it's the trademark of the series. But who actually invented it? Most of you would say Bayek. But then, why was Cassandra doing it centuries beforehand? Did you ever think about that? I bet you definitely did. And the irony is that despite being a pretty tightly packed narrative-driven franchise, Assassin's Creed has plenty of plot holes like this that send you down the rabbit hole. And me being me, I found some really interesting ones that I'll try my best to explain while also sharing my personal thoughts along the way. And I can safely say that at least 3 of them will leave you scratching your head for a long time. So as I was saying, the leap of faith is a staple of Assassin's Creed. I mean, every game has it. And when Assassin's Creed Origins was announced, fans were excited. After all, it was supposed to tell the origin of the Assassin Brotherhood. Who wouldn't want to know how all the tenets, rituals, and most importantly, the leap of faith came to be? Well, we got an answer. But it wasn't exactly straightforward. In the game, we learned that the leap of faith was a practice performed by the Magi to renounce fear and embrace courage. Bayek reveals this while teaching it to Khemu, explaining that his own father taught him the same lesson. And it's safe to assume that his father also taught him how to perform the leap itself, making it a part of the Magi code. And after that scene, the leap of faith doesn't receive much attention until the very end of the game. Once Bayek establishes the hidden ones, we see several members performing it, including Aya. At that point, it's easy to assume that the tradition originated with the Magi, whose history dates back to roughly 1540 BCE. But that's where the lore starts to fall apart, because if the leap of faith was purely an Egyptian tradition, then how was Cassandra performing it in 400 BCE, and that too with the exact shape and form? There was no direct connection between her and the Egyptians because she grew up on a tiny island with a relatively small population. And the strangest part, the moment we take control of her, she performs a move without hesitation. She doesn't comment on it, she doesn't learn it, she simply knows how to do it, which means she had been doing it for quite some time. But when exactly did she learn it? Because there's nobody in Kefalonia who could realistically have taught her that technique, and she wasn't surrounded by people skilled enough to pull off jumps like that. For characters like Ezio, it makes sense because his father was an assassin. Connor also makes sense to some degree because his tribe had ties to the Brotherhood, and most other protagonists had some form of prior exposure to the practice. Cassandra, however, didn't, which is why it feels like a genuine lore inconsistency. A much better solution would have been to have Darius teach her. After all, she literally meets him during the DLC. And by the end of that same DLC, Darius travels to Egypt where we see him live for a period of time. That would have actually solved one side of the problem. Maybe Darius teaches a leap to the Magi who later pass it down through generations until it eventually reaches Bayek. Great, but then we're right back where we started. Who taught Cassandra? That's the part the series never explains. And honestly, I'm glad the newer games like Valhalla, Shadows, and even Black Flag Resynced seem to be correcting these kinds of mistakes by actually showing characters learn the leap of faith before performing it. I just hope Ubisoft eventually gives us some sort of explanation, because until then, Cassandra's leap of faith remains one of the strangest plot holes in Assassin's Creed. With Black Flag, we got a massive buff to the already existing and complex First Civilization lore. The introduction of the Sage was later expanded even further in Valhalla, but let's talk about the 2 problems with this concept that were introduced along the way. First up, we need to understand how the Templars and Assassins actually detect the Sage. It's usually based on one distinct feature, heterochromia, or in simple words, mismatched eye color. We'll get to that later. But in Black Flag, it's also implied that their faces are exactly the same, even down to facial hair. Like how John Standish in the modern day is 100% identical to Bartholomew Roberts. Now, I looked into this and people try to explain it by saying Standish is a direct descendant of Roberts, which is why he shares the same face. But if that's the case, then how do you explain the massive sage head beneath the assassin base in Tulum? Because Standish was born in the modern day while Roberts lived long after that statue was created. And since we also find letters from a previous sage in Black Flag who encountered Torres, that might explain how Torres himself knows so much about sages. Now, all of that still kinda works, but then comes the bigger issue. How did they completely change the way sages are recognized in Assassin's Creed Unity? I get it, it was done to preserve the twist, but in doing so, it feels like they contradicted their own lore. Sages are supposed to be the reincarnations of Aita, Juno's husband. He was preserved by her so he could survive the collapse, which explains why sages carry so many Isu memories and knowledge of ancient sites. And based on the facial structure of Standish and Roberts, they closely resemble how Aita actually looked back in the day. This is often explained by fans as a rare genetic coincidence, where the same issue template randomly reappears in history, which in our case happens with Roberts and John the IT guy. But the games never really spelled that out clearly, and honestly, I still consider it a bit of a plot hole. And even if we accept the sages randomly appear with Ida's face throughout history, then we still have the heterochromia issue. And now my question is, are both sides just not paying attention because the assassins and Templars encounter multiple sages? They know about the eye condition, and we even see them acknowledge it properly in Black Flag. But for some reason in Unity, nobody seems to recognize that Germain is a sage, or even Jack de Molay, even though both of them clearly show the signature of different eye colors, but it doesn't make any sense still. We know knowledge is passed down between branches, so how does something this important just get forgotten? I have a few theories, like the Homestead fire that Bullock witnessed, which could have destroyed records. But then again, Achilles survived, so how does that work? Let me know what you think about this. It is one of the most immersive parts of Assassin's Creed for me. Like, imagine reliving the memories of your own ancestor and seeing what they did, and even verifying whether they actually went to school the same way our parents told us. But jokes aside, it's a genuinely fascinating concept, and ever since the first game, they've expanded it gradually. Then they shifted it to using the DNA of someone with an ancestral link to a specific ancestor. And in modern games, they've advanced it even further. We can now use objects they've touched to access their memories, and the concept is marvelous, no doubt. But if that was the case, I wouldn't be making this video. There are two things that don't make sense. Let's start with a major one. If we match the timelines, Black Flag is where the system really gets established as a staple. The real world reason was to avoid relying on a fixed modern day protagonist, but in lore, it's explained as technological advancement. However, in the Assassin's Creed 2016 movie, we see something completely different. Abstergo is again using physical test subjects inside an animus that looks far more advanced than what we usually see in the games, and that raises a jarring question. If they already had discovered how to access genetic memories without needing a living descendant and only through DNA samples, then why bother capturing Callum Lynch to do the work? They could have just used any other unnamed employee instead. That's literally why the Animus exists in the first place, to streamline research and accelerate their goals. Yet in the film, there are moments where Callum is constantly losing synchronization and interrupting the process. This directly contributes to the death of their highest ranking member, Alan Rickon, and the failure to secure the Apple of Eden they were chasing. And nobody really questioned it at first, but it's actually a major inconsistency, because the movie is 100% canon to the lore established in AC Origins, which also uses the same DNA memory system introduced in Black Flag. In the same game, we even see modern-day emails referencing what happened to Templar Alan Rickon, and Sophia Rickon is also mentioned, confirming the film's place in the canon, which makes this even more confusing. It's not like the movie is set in some earlier era where the technology didn't exist, because it takes place in 2016. And Abstergo, as we know, is the most powerful corporation in that universe. They absolutely share research and integrate their findings across branches. So why doesn't it align here? I know they wanted him to force 100% synchronization as those memories of Aguilar were behind a trauma wall similar to Ezio, but why didn't the same happen for Arno, as Dead King's DLC was full of trauma? That's the question. And personally, I've never fully liked this direction. It reduces the stakes in a weird way, like after discovering Desmond's body, they suddenly develop a system that lets them relive anyone's memories so easily. Then what were the other 16 subjects for? They all died, yet this breakthrough didn't exist back then. Which makes me wonder, was all of that just a setup? Like a way to capture, control, and torture assassins under the guise of research? And if that's true, then it makes Abstergo even more terrifying than we thought. This one is probably the most talked about in Assassin's Creed in general, and a lot of creators have already discussed its potential. But my concern is slightly different, and I did some digging to actually try and justify it. We know that in Assassin's Creed Rogue, Shay kills Charles Dorian, acting as a bridge between Unity, Assassin's Creed 3, and Black Flag at the same time. That was a great moment, and I loved it. But after rewatching that scene multiple times while making these videos, I started questioning something. That entire sequence takes place in 1776, and right before dying, Charles says,
"Connor and his assassins. The American Revolution undid your Templar business."
It sounds badass, and it also suggests that Connor was already feared across the Assassin-Templar conflict at that time, and it also confirms that Shay was aware of him. But then again, inconsistencies start showing up. Around the same time in 1776, Connor was still young. If you've played Assassin's Creed 3, you know how long the opening actually is. You're forced through multiple sequences before you even become a full assassin and start actively targeting Templars. By sequence 9, Connor has only killed 2 or 3 Templars, and that includes Thomas Hickey. And even the major Templars he's dealt with at that point are people like William Johnson and John Pitcairn. Meanwhile, figures like Haytham and Charles Lee are still operating freely and running their agenda. So the question is, on what basis did Charles say that Connor had undone their business? At that point in the timeline, Connor has only just begun dismantling their network. One possible explanation is that Charles wasn't referring to complete destruction, but rather the disruption of key operations, like killing influential figures connected to Shay or broader Templar plans, especially around the precursor box Shay had recovered by then. But the problem is, the game never really follows up on this properly. We never get a proper continuation of Shay's story in Unity, no DLC expanding on his perspective, no aftermath where he reacts to Connor's rise, nothing. And that's what makes it feel incomplete, because realistically, it's hard to believe Achilles never told Connor about Shay, especially given how long Shay operated against them, and especially during the period where Connor himself was pushing for peace. The Kenway saga was incredible, but Rogue in particular feels like a huge missed opportunity. Just imagine what could have been if Shay's story had actually been followed through, how all these intersecting arcs could have properly collided and resolved. Instead, the games leave it hanging and then just move on. Okay, this one is a bit funny, and I'm pretty sure you've thought about it at some point across every Assassin's Creed game. Whenever you kill a major story target, the game snaps you out into this wide, almost dreamlike room where you interact with them in a way that somehow leaves you with more questions than answers. It's a staple of the series, no confusion there, and I totally get it. But the more I think about it, the more it starts to bother me. Because before assassinating these targets, we usually get a clear opening where we can take them out easily, and naturally, while trying to complete the objective, we often end up getting detected. So how exactly does the world just not react during these confessions? There are so many examples of this, especially in Assassin's Creed 3, and honestly, when you break it down, it looks kind of hilarious. 1 minute before assassinating Pitcairn, redcoats are firing from every direction, and chaos is everywhere. And the next minute, total silence. You're calmly having a philosophical conversation in a wide void. Then the confession ends and boom, you're right back in the middle of the battlefield again like nothing happened. Sometimes it's explained as an animus memory synchronization moment, where the assassin mentally reconstructs the final interaction with the target. And in some cases, like the Kenway games and the original Assassin's Creed, it feels far less consistent. Even the novels describe it more like a microsecond, almost telepathic exchange between the assassins and the target. And what really gets me is that even after all these years, we still don't have a clear definitive explanation for what's actually happening in the world. Maybe our approach isn't fully canon, maybe the animus is just reconstructing a subjective final moment that never literally happened that way. But then again, in some missions, we don't even get the chance to properly kill targets if we go off script, which makes things even more confusing. So are the guards just politely waiting outside while we have a spiritual heart-to-heart? That's the part I don't think any of us actually knows. It's one of those plot holes that became so iconic we just stopped questioning it, we just accept it. And honestly, I don't mind it staying that way, but I wouldn't mind a proper explanation either. Let me know what your theories are in the comments, because this one still feels weirdly unresolved. And with that being said, the video comes to an end. I hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe if you did. I'll see you in the next one. Till then, take care and goodbye.